CNN's Jake Tapper had a bit of a tantrum after former counterterrorism director Joe Kent quote tweeted or quote posted something that DropSite News had reported on. Now Jake Tapper gets real sensitive when it comes to DropSite, his competitor that actually does, journalism and gets a lot of praise for the journalism DropSite News does. But before I get to the details, which I'm sure you're gonna love, Cenk, your 2 cents.
Yeah, so it's something I want you to notice in this story, and you can notice it going forward too, is that when they don't have the facts on their side, people like Jake Tapper immediately go to smears and name calling that are totally free of the facts. So here he's gonna name call DropSite News and Joe Kent, but never does he disprove any of the DropSite stories, which by the way which are about mainly, not about this one, but mainly about how Epstein worked on behalf of Israel.
Yep, sure did.
And Jake Tapper doesn't want anybody to know that, so that he's been talking smack against DropSite News the entire time, but completely fact-free.
DropSite News is one of the only publications in the United States of America that tells the truth about Israel's depravity and war crimes. It's that simple.
Yeah.
DropSite is the only source that does a fantastic job in detailing Israel's expansionist policy, their land theft, land annexation, and again, their terrorism. Israel carries out terroristic acts. They're doing so right now in Lebanon. They're doing so right now in Syria, where they're occupying even more land. The media isn't even reporting on that at all. Obviously, they carried out a genocide in Gaza and continue to, just be incredibly brutal against Palestinian civilians in the Gaza Strip. And at the same time, they're occupying 53% of the Gaza Strip as we speak. So with all of that in mind, let's talk about the story that precipitated this tantrum from the likes of Jake Tapper. So here's the context. It has to do with the fact that the United States lost at least 6 military aircraft recently, both on Friday during US-Israeli strikes on Iran and during an operation to retrieve a pilot and weapon systems officer whose F-15 fighter jet got shot down over Iranian territory, okay? So the F-15 that was shot down was deep inside Iran when it came under Iranian fire, and it came crashing down. Luckily, the 2 individuals in the aircraft were not killed. They were ejected from the aircraft. Within an hour of that strike, the US was able to find the pilot and rescue the pilot. However, apparently there was the weapons system officer who was missing for about 2 days. But over the weekend, it was reported that the US military went in and rescued this individual. He was wounded or injured, but luckily survived. Now, Iran had put out a reward for anyone who recovered the American first. But luckily, our military was able to recover him before the Iranians were. Now, Iran, I don't think would have harmed him, but they would have made this individual a prisoner of war and used him as leverage in negotiations with the United States. Now, the Washington Post claims that CIA allegedly launched a deception campaign to mislead the Iranians into thinking they already had the airmen and were basically taking him out of Iran on the ground. But obviously that wasn't the case. Now the US rescued him before the Iranians could get to him, but military experts, including Marine Infantry combat veteran James Webb, who happens to work as a military consultant now, says he has reason to believe that the pilot was coincidentally saved as the US was in the area in the middle of a separate operation entirely. Here's the argument that he makes.
The footprint itself is indicative of a larger operation that was going on, or perhaps bumped into the fact that we had a downed pilot in the region. And this is what's really opened my eyes, was today seeing that there are some 76 aircraft involved in this and potentially hundreds of guys. And when you're taking a look at the different contingencies in place or what could have possibly happened, it really opens a lot of doors into, maybe they were going to grab the nuclear dust, or, perhaps the most logical and baseline thing is they were thinking they were going to contact and brought a lot of people with them. feeding that is the traditional way that these teams go in. It's traditionally an Air Force operation to recover their personnel. We have a lot of people on the deck, apparently, from different branches of the service. DevGru or SEAL Team 6 was there. The 160th looks like they were there with the little birds on the deck, which is an odd thing. They would have flown in on those C-130s and been pulled off the back and put into action. That would be, very atypical. That is a very heavy footprint, would have attracted a lot of attention. It appears to have done so.
Right, and I mean, he makes such a great point there, right? 76 aircraft to rescue one airman who was missing. I mean, obviously that's gonna draw attention by the Iranians and you're gonna become a target. So what was really going on? Were those aircraft in Iran specifically for the rescue mission? And I wanna go to one more video before we go to the whole Joe Kent debacle with Jake Tapper. So here's Colonel Daniel Davis explaining why he also thinks that the US was actually in the area for a separate mission and just happened to run into the missing pilot, the missing airman. Take a look.
And by the way, I'm showing an image on the screen here. On the lower left-hand side there, you see U.S. search aircraft filmed operating in this area. This is where allegedly the F-15 was taken down, that jettisoned these two pilots. And then you can see in the upper right-hand corner, the other red box, a wreckage of the U.S. transport aircraft, which were right by Isfahan, which is one of the reasons why evidence is starting to pile up that this was more than just an operation to extract the pilot. From what I have read, and I was looking at the Air Force manual on these CSAR kind of operations, and the idea is you go in there with the smallest footprint that you need to get the job done. You're not going to go in with a couple of these. These are what the wreckage you saw there. These HC-130J Combat King 2, as my understanding. You're not going to go in with these which can hold, a company plus of men. These two of them. Why would you go in there with that many people if your objective was to just get that pilot back?
Now I'm gonna tell you about someone that is a partner of ours that our audience loves. If you know me, I'm always out of time. When I need a fresh meal that's delicious and nutritious, my go-to is Cook Unity. Cook Unity is a chef-crafted meal straight to your door. I recently tried jerk chicken rasta pasta in my last order. Why did I pick that one? Because the name sounded fun. And it turned out it was delicious. That sounds fun. So it's high protein, it gave me the energy I needed to finish the day strong, and I like to finish the day strong. These aren't boring, repetitive meals. I've done a lot of them. These are all-star chefs, Food Network alums, and James Beard winners, which I found out is a good thing. Almost like James Beard, no, I'm just kidding. You're handpicking seasonal ingredients and balancing bold flavors with nutrition, which I need. There are over 25 diets and cuisines to choose from to satisfy your cravings and wellness goals. Commitment-free subscription starts as low as $11 a meal. That's like half a sandwich in LA, and you get a delicious award-winning meal. So skip deliveries, pause, or cancel anytime. Taste craftsmanship in every bite from the award-winning chefs behind Cook Unity. Go to cookunity.com/TYT or enter code TYT before checkout to get 50% off your first order. That's 50% off your first order by using code TYT or going to cookunity.com/TYT.
Now, of course, none of these details, which are incredibly important, were reported by the corporate media or legacy media in the United States. But I love hearing these details because it gives you a better sense of what's actually going on in Iran with our actions, with our military actions.
Right. So look, as much as anybody is an expert on these military affairs, is like those guys, we're all still guessing, right? So I have no idea if it was just a rescue mission or if it was something else on top. But I could totally believe that it was just a rescue mission because politically it would have been a disaster if we lost that guy. And morally too. So I'm super glad we got him back. I also need you to know the cost of that. I don't mind paying those costs to rescue an American. I do mind bearing those costs because we started this war. We didn't need the war at all, right? So anyway, we lost two planes, a couple of planes and a couple of helicopters, okay? So the entire mission cost us $300 million added to Israel's tab, right? Of course, Israel's never gonna pay any of that, but we started this war for them. So we almost lost a couple of guys there. We have already lost 13 service members. A couple of guys got injured in this rescue operation. And we have this giant bill that is now going to be sent to the American taxpayers. So it's maddening. And one last thing, guys. no matter what the mission is for why they sent so many guys into that rescue
76
operation.
aircraft, yep.
Now Iran knows what our tactics are. In fact, I think we made a huge mistake by bragging about all of our tactics all over the press. As I was reading it, I was like, why are you telling us all of these details of how you set up the airport strip? You created a new one.
There was a makeshift strip, yeah.
Right, and all of the extra details. It's to get credit for Trump and the team, right? But meanwhile, what if we have to do a second rescue operation because it looks like Iran could shoot down our planes? So now they're going to be armed with that knowledge. And what if they hit the plane with a couple hundred troops on it?
By the way, according to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, the US now has complete air dominance over Iran.
He said that we completely control their airspace. I mean, what a preposterous lie. So now we've lost how many? Now, when you include the rescue effort, I think we're up to about 6 planes and helicopters that we've lost over Iran.
Yep.
So it doesn't look like complete air dominance to me.
Sure doesn't.
Super worried about the next time.
So all of that context is really important for you to understand in order to understand the next part of the story and what Joe Kent had posted prior to the airmen getting rescued. So he had quote posted a drop site post that said that Iran state-linked Tasnim News, citing a military source, claiming US forces are bombing areas in southwest Iran where a missing pilot may be located, alleging Washington has lost hope of recovery and is attempting to kill him. Now that's what one Iranian state-linked news source had to say. Make of that what you will. But in response, Joe Kent says, praying for the rescue of our downed pilot and the safe return of our special operators going in to get him back. Apparently, Jake Tapper lost his marbles over this because of the fact that Joe Kent quote posted drop site news, which I don't know, Tapper is very salty about. So let's go to what he says. Former National Counterterrorism Center Director Joe Kent sharing Iranian state-linked outlet. Wait, so let's stop there. Drop site news is not linked to Iran. Drop site news was founded by legendary war journalist Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm. What do you mean Iranian linked outlet?
Yeah, look, I'm not as sure about that because, so he has referred to drop site news as Iranian backed before, which is just an outrageous lie and defamation, right? But in this case, maybe he's referring to the fact that drop site news is quoting the Iranian state linked Tasnim News. But even so, guys, think about it, right? He said, drop site said, citing a military source claims the US forces are bombing, right? They didn't say that the US forces are bombing. They didn't say that the Iranians are right. They just quoted Iranian press.
Right. We
quote Israeli press all the time. We quote Iranian press. You know why? Because we're journalists. And our job is to say, oh, here's what that side is saying, here's what this side is saying, and now let's try to suss out what's true and not true. But Jake Tapper doesn't do that. He goes, that's it, you're all guilty. I have some sort of connection to Iran, so I'm gonna smear drop site news, I'm gonna smear Joe Kent. And Joe Kent didn't even reference the Iranian story. He just said, I hope our troops are safe.
Right.
But so it gives you a sense of Jake Tapper was lying in wait for Joe Kent.
100%.
He couldn't wait to try to discredit Joe Kent. Why? Because Joe Kent implicated Israel in us going to war with Iran, and Jake Tapper can't stand that.
Yeah, Joe Kent told the truth to the American people, much like Secretary of State Marco Rubio did at the start of this war, by noting that we got dragged into it by Israel. It's that simple. We all know it. It's not a secret. So stop lying to the American people after the fact. We know that Israel wanted this war. Benjamin Netanyahu at the beginning of the war said, I've been wanting this for decades. I've been dreaming about this for decades. So Israel wants something and they get what they want because they've captured our government. It's that simple. Does Jake Tapper think that he's gonna lie his way into convincing the American people that what the truth is isn't actually the truth?
Yes, he definitely does. To be fair to Jake, that's what they've been doing.
Let's not be fair to Jake.
No, that's what they've been doing for the last 40 to 50 years. They've been telling us that the Muslims are the terrorists and they're the aggressors, and poor Israel, as they took more and more land, was the victims and only acting in self-defense. Golly gee, I don't know how they wound up with all that land, occupied territories, parts of Lebanon, Syria, etc. So Jake was right for all this time, not about the facts or the news. He was right that Israeli propaganda did trick the American people into believing that Israel was the victim all these years. What he can't get through with his thick head is, Jake, the internet exists now. We have access to the actual news and we share it with people and they can confirm it.
Yeah.
They can see what is right and not right. So this really pathetic, desperate attempt to smear Joe Kent is because he quote tweeted someone else referring to what the Iranian press is saying, right? But we quote you and you're some form of American media, even when you're lying, and then we give the context for it.
Exactly.
So should we never quote you? Because
let's actually talk about Jake Tapper's conduct, because in response to what Tapper had to say, Joe Kent says that Tapper's purpose, and I agree with him on this, like the entire corporate media, is to promote this foolish war and attack anyone who points out how this war isn't in our nation's interest. And then he tells people to read independent media, Iranian media, and US media, always question those cheering on wars and always pray for our troops. I agree with that wholeheartedly, okay? Now Tapper responded to that by saying, like, anyone who watches my show knows that I don't promote the war, I simply cover it. Critically. Okay, Jake, okay. But let's, I have in my notes, let's pause for laughter. Good job, Jake. Now Tapper,
I didn't read that.
When it comes to Tapper's conduct as a journalist, a fair journalist on CNN, let us not forget that he literally had Emily Schrader, who works for Israeli intelligence, on his program to speak on behalf of the Iranian people. If you don't remember, here's your reminder.
How do the Iranians you're talking to, how do they see the future unfolding in Iran?
Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of problems with the internet still being shut off, although there is some limited use with Starlink and limited other options. But by and large, the responses from Iranians that I've spoken to has been overwhelmingly in favor of the United States and Israeli action on the ground.
At no point during that broadcast was it disclosed to viewers that Schrader works for Israeli intelligence in Unit 8200, Cenk.
That's weird. So look, here's another country's media that we often use, Israel's. And they actually have a very healthy press, and we often get real facts from them. And so Plus 972 magazine is amazing. Haaretz often has great stories, but Times of Israel and many of the other publications, including Miriam Adels's publications in Israel, sometimes because they're good journalists, like it's 972 and Haaretz, and sometimes they are inadvertently say like,
no, they report the truth because Israeli society loves these wars. They're supportive of it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas here in the United States, reporting the truth would turn the American people against Israel, clearly. Who wants to fight wars on behalf of a foreign country? That's ridiculous. In Israel, they love the wars. So yeah, the journalists are gonna report the truth, including what their actual objectives are.
And so they think that it really doesn't go much outside Israel anyway, so it can't really affect. And because why does it not go much outside of Israel? Because they know the American media will not be as critical of Israel as the Israeli media, right? In fact, the American media's whole job is to cover up the news and do propaganda for Israel. And so that's why Jake Tapper gets so touchy when you point out, wait, we had no interest in this war at all. It was Israel that 100 was clearly, super clearly pushed us into this war. The Israeli press says it, right? But the American media goes, no, cover up all the news. Don't let anyone criticize beloved Israel. So like his bias is so gigantic, but to me, one of the greatest tricks that mainstream media ever did was declaring themselves objective. And they just said it, like we are the objective ones and everyone else is biased. If you're going to be massively biased, that is a brilliant piece of propaganda, right?
Yeah, except we're not stupid and we can see through it, so.
But before the online media came, to be fair, they had a monopoly on almost all of the media.
They did.
So they tricked tons of Democrats and Republicans and everyone in the middle to think that Israel was our ally and that Israel was the victim. And so that, and through all that, Anna, as you know, they've taken over $300 billion from America.
Way
and
more
people
than that.
like Jake Tapper pretended that that's for our good. Oh, well, Jake, if that's true, why doesn't Israel give us back the $300 billion? And then that'll be great for Israel, right? No, they never do that. No, only give to Israel, only give to Israel. And anybody else that says it, you're an anti-Semite if you ever question Israel. And that's another reason why the Israeli press is better, because you can't call them anti-Semitic, which is their #1 tool to do propaganda in America. Jake Tapper loves that propaganda tool.
Yeah.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.